Patricia Grainger was a 25-year-old mum of one. She had learning disabilities, and on the 10th of August 1997, she was found dead. She'd been strangled, she'd been beaten. It was pretty bad. And that's what we're going to cover today. There is a few disclaimers before we go through. It's just viewer discretion is advised. We don't go into like gruesome detail, but there is some things that happened here that you might not want to be listening to. So viewer discretion is advised. And the usual disclaimer, this is a real life story. It's a cold case. The killer's never been found. And although it's a cold case, it is still very active. So it's important if you share it or you comment, please do so with sensitivity. It's that active in case that if you've got any information or if you want to look up more about this, you can head over to whokilledmymom.com, which is a site that started back in 2008 in hopes of finding extra information about the case. At the time, Patricia Grainger, also known as Pat for short, was 25. She was just over 5 foot tall, medium build with dark hair. She was living at Buchanan Road in Parsons Cross, Sheffield, England, with a 5-year-old son and her parents. Patricia had learning disabilities. The doctor said that she had the mental age of about a 10-year-old. It's thought that she had ADHD, but at the time of the murder it hadn't been diagnosed. She also had hearing problems. Now, she was supposed to wear an hearing aid, but she didn't wear it like all the time. Because of the way Patricia was, she was quite often bullied, and so were her family. And this was by a lot of people. It weren't just young kids, it was some adults as well. She'd be sat in front of her house and someone would walk past and spit at her or shout at her, smack her, insult her. And there was no reason for it. They were just being horrible and bullying. That's it. I nearly swore then. There was no need for it at all. That being said, anyone that actually knew Patricia said that she was lovely. She was a lovely woman. She never hurt a fly. She talked to anyone that would give her time of day. She'd befriend anyone that would give her time of day. She was just an all-round lovely woman. On Sunday, the 10th of August 1997, Patricia Grainger's body was found at Sheffield Lane Dike, Parsons Cross, Sheffield, England. For those of you that don't know, a dike's pretty much a stream, a little river, little stream, and it's designed to hold back floods, so there's generally fields around and it generally goes down quite a bit. Basically, when there's a flood coming, it'll hold the water back a bit to stop it from flooding further down. In this case, there's a bit of a floodplain. There's a path that goes either side, and there's also a housing estate on either side. The dike's about 1 mile away from where Patricia lived. It's essentially behind some houses. You go down one road, and there's a row of houses, and then it's just behind those. Now, this story doesn't actually start on the 10th. It starts on the 4th of August 1997, and that was the last time Patricia's family saw her. That's 6 days before her body was to be found. So on Monday the 4th of August 1994, Patricia's mom had phoned Patricia's sister and said that she hadn't come home. Later on in the investigation, a witness had come forward to say that they saw Patricia on the Tuesday around the area of the dike where her body was found. Now, this wasn't the first time Patricia had gone missing, so they weren't that much of a concern. They reckoned they'd just find her with her friends or with her boyfriend or something like that. And in 1 or 2 days, she'd usually come home. So on Wednesday, when Patricia's sister phoned back up and found out that Patricia still weren't home, she advised her mum and dad to phone the police. So they did that. They got a missing persons report open, and then Patricia's mum and dad went round to all Patricia's friends' houses, seeing if they were there, if they'd seen her, which of course they hadn't. They went round the general area looking, see if they could find Patricia or any evidence that she'd been there, but to absolutely no avail. On Thursday, they still hadn't heard anything. But again, later on, a witness came forward and said that, yeah, I saw her at Northern General on that Thursday. And this was later confirmed by CCTV footage as well. For those of you wondering, Northern General is about 2 miles on foot from Patricia's house to the hospital. So it's not that far. It's not like she travelled the distance. It's just 2 miles. Now it comes to Friday. Still no sight of her. Still no word off her. And it came up later on in the investigation. Someone came forward and said, yeah, I think I saw her. She was on the Holgate estate. Now, the Holgate estate was the estate opposite the estate she lived on. So you've got her estate, you've got the dike, and then you've got another estate. That other estate was the Holgate estate. So again, she's not far away. She's only perhaps a mile and a half away from home. Still nothing on Saturday. But yet again, we've got another witness saying we've seen her. On Saturday the 9th, the day before Patricia was found, a man was seen talking to someone who the witness believes is Patricia. She was chatting to the man about 7:45, so 7:45 on the morning of the Saturday the 9th, at the junction of Holgate Crescent and Holgate Road. Now that junction is basically the entrance to the dike from the opposite side to where she lives. So you've got where Patricia lives, then you've got the dike, and then just as the housing estate starts on the other side of the dike, that entrance is where Patricia was, or at least where she was alleged to have been seen. The witness says the man she was talking to was white, aged about 30, he was 5 feet 6 inch, with dark, greased or gelled hair. Up until now, that is the last known sighting of Patricia alive. So in brief, apparently she'd been seen on Tuesday near the dike, then on Thursday she'd been seen 2 miles in the opposite direction at the hospital, then on Friday she'd been seen on the estate at the other side of the dike, and then on Saturday she'd been seen at the entrance of the dike, and then she was found on Sunday. A witness did come forward to say that they saw a scruffy looking man around the dike at roughly around the time that Patricia had been murdered, on the 10th of August. So we've got the right time, we've got the right place, and we've got a scruffy looking man in that area. This witness also said she was scared to walk past him. The man's hands were in his pockets, fidgeting. He didn't look very nice, he didn't look very pleasant, and he gave her a cold stare before walking off. This woman said it weren't very pleasant, she didn't want to walk past him, she was scared. A photo of it was created of that man. Obviously, if you listen on podcast, you can't see it. It is on whokilledmymom.com, but for anyone watching the video, you'll now be able to see the photo of it. I'm not sure of the time, but later on that Sunday, a group of young lads were playing in the fields and around the dike when they came across Patricia's half-naked body laid face down in the water. Her body had been submerged in the water by the weight of a divan bed base, which had obviously been put on top of her to conceal her body. She had been strangled and stabbed and beaten to death, as well as being mutilated. The autopsy report shows that she had water in her lungs. This suggests she was alive at the time she was placed at the dike. And that also means while she was being stabbed, sexually abused, mutilated, and beaten, she was still alive. And although the autopsy report shows that she'd been beaten around her face and around her body, and she was covered in bruises, there weren't actually any signs of struggle either. Now, because of how Patricia was, this could mean a few things. It could mean she was too scared to fight back, but scared of that much that she didn't even fight back while they were doing these awful things to her. It could also mean that they'd knocked her out before doing these things to her, so she was still alive, she was just unconscious. Or it could also mean that Patricia trusted these people that much that she thought it was okay, she let them do it. For the most part, Patricia's family believe that she trusted them, and the people that did this to her abused her trust. Due to the police wanting to protect the public from the details of this story, and apparently protect the investigation, because letting it out could damage the investigation, it wasn't until 22 years later, in 2019, that her son revealed the extent of what actually happened to Patricia. Patricia had been stabbed multiple times, including stab wounds to her neck. She'd been strangled, she'd been raped, and she'd been mutilated. To the extent that they'd removed one of her nipples, and they tried to remove the other. They'd also cut and mutilated her vagina. Despite the police talking to Patricia's friends and family and boyfriend and other acquaintances, trying to find out where Patricia was for that last week of her life, there has been no information come out other than the ones that we've previously mentioned. So there is 6 full days, nearly 150 hours worth of time, but nobody has a clue where she were. And obviously she had to be somewhere, she had to be staying somewhere. But no one's ever come forward to say, yeah, she was staying here. Patricia's body is thought to have been in the water for 21 hours before it was found. And a post-mortem tests were done to find out if she'd been drinking or taking drugs, and there was no alcohol or drugs found in her system at all. Patricia's handbag were missing, and the weapon had never been recovered. Because it's unknown where Patricia was staying for that week, it's virtually impossible to know what happened to her, the extent of the damages, how long she'd been suffering for. So it is a really crucial thing of where she was staying. Patricia's son said But Patricia weren't a small lady. Although she were mentally vulnerable, she weren't a big lady. And she would have put up some sort of fight, which leads him to think that whoever did this weren't a small person by any means, or quite a big person, or there was more than one person involved. So after Patricia's body had been discovered, in 1997, 2 women and a man was arrested. They were arrested because their accounts of where Patricia had been staying were varied. They didn't align, they didn't reconcile properly. So the police arrested them and said, there's something dodgy going on here. What actually happened? But that didn't lead to anything. All 3 were later released on bail, pending further investigation. Also in 1997, a 45-year-old man was remanded in custody by Sheffield magistrates. He was charged with Patricia's murder, but it was later released due to a witness withdrawing their statement. Not much happened between then and 2008, so 11 years later. 2 men aged 51 and 59 from Sheffield were arrested in connection with the death of Patricia's murder. The police stated the men were helping police with inquiries. They were later bailed, and the bail carried on till April 2009, which is 5 months, bearing in mind, when they were released without charge. In 2009, the police had a suspect which prevented Patricia's son from seeking help from sources like Crime Watch to appeal for information. In July 2010, the police said they were doing a few inquiries, but it were mainly an exercise of eliminating DNA, and they didn't expect any new suspects to come from it. In August 2012, although not publicly released, police found 2 partial DNA profiles from under Patricia's fingernails. One was of a man and one was of a woman. Now, it might seem at this point like we're moving forward, but this is where the story takes a massive step back. In August 2014, police discarded all of Patricia's items. There were over 50 items, 33 of which were clothing, including the clothes she was wearing at the time. I don't know if it was then or before then. They also discarded the divan bed base that they'd found on top of Patricia, concealing the body. And they said that they'd done tests on that, but they couldn't ever find anything linking it to a murder. Which, alright, I suppose it might not have had anything to do with her murder, but it were on top of her concealing a body, so it was linked to the murder. And if you add that a little bit further, you could say that she had water in her lungs, so she didn't actually die until she was there at the dike, and it could have been the bed that stopped her from getting up. I mean, if she's been beaten and she's been mutilated and she's weak, is there a possibility that she could have crawled away and this bed base has held her in place as well as hiding her body? Either which way, it doesn't matter. If she'd already died, the bed base was on top of her. It's therefore linked. How is that not linked? Anyway, the police said they couldn't find any link. It were no more use to them, so they got rid of it. Now, if you're thinking that's a bit obscene, then you're right. An investigation in 2015, the report shows that South Yorkshire Police did mishandle Patricia's property, including 33 items of clothing which had been taken from her house, which had never been forensically tested. These are the type of things that made her son really annoyed. They took 33 items of clothing from Patricia's house to DNA for evidence, and then never actually tested them or anything. Why did they even take them? If the police at the time thought they were useful, then why were they later deemed not useful, and vice versa? It's that I just think that's very strange. I think getting rid of the items is strange. Maybe again, not knowing, I'm not a forensic expert. Maybe they'd stored all the DNA, if that's possible. It just seems strange to get rid of evidence quite prematurely. And throughout all this time, there has also been points where the police have been in a bit of turmoil. They got rid of their cold case team because they couldn't afford to keep it on. They were in a bit of financial difficulty, so South Yorkshire Police got rid of their cold case department, and things like that. So going forward in the long-term base of this, it is them things that have possibly hindered this case so far. But my eyes and Patricia's family eyes, the thing that's hindering this case so much is not knowing where she were. Somebody, somewhere, must know where Patricia was that week. Where she was staying, who she'd been talking to, something. There is some information out there, somebody knows it. It can't just be the murderer that knows that. But that is the problem. It's now been 25 years and that's all the information we have. There is a massive jigsaw puzzle piece missing out of this. And that, even a little part of that jigsaw puzzle piece could make up the picture of what happened, or who did it, or even where things happened. And where things happened could then eventually lead to blood that had been found somewhere, which DNA, and it's so frustrating that there is such a big chunk of this missing. If it were a little chunk, you could understand that no one's seen it, but it's such a big chunk, somebody has to have seen it somewhere. Somebody has to know something. Due to privacy laws in the UK, and I am an advocate of privacy before anyone says anything, but due to privacy laws in the UK, we don't know, I don't know, the identity of the people that were arrested and so on and so forth, which is a bit of a shame because it's quite interesting that under Patricia's fingernails there'd been DNA of a man and DNA of a woman found, and there were a man and a woman that had been arrested, or two men and a woman that had been arrested. It'd be interesting to find out if they were the same people, because obviously if they are, then we've got a good suspect here. And there's more questions. Why did the person that withdrew the statement that got that man out of prison, or prevented that man from going to prison, why did that person withdraw the statement? What was the statement? It's absolutely mind-blowing. It just doesn't make sense. There is so much to know about this, but so little available. And I don't mean to be repetitive, there is so many questions, and there's only really two questions that Patricia's family are asking. There's only two things that Patricia's family want to know. And they are, did anyone see Patricia in or around the Northern General area on Thursday the 7th of August? Again, there's not enough information to say what she was doing there, who she were with, where she'd come from, where she were going. And then the next question is, where did she stay from the 6th to the 10th of August 1997? It's still unknown, but she must have stayed somewhere. Now that's pretty much everything in regards to the case, but there's a few things I want to mention. First of all, there are a lot of cold cases in Sheffield, and even more in the broader county of South Yorkshire. Patricia's son posted a list onto whokilledmymom.com in 2016. And from that list, there is 14 cold cases in South Yorkshire, ranging from 10 years before and 10 years after. Out of them 14 cold cases, 7 of which are females. In my head, knowing the things I know about people like the Yorkshire Ripper, surely it is important to look at them cases closely. Surely this person that's done this thing hasn't just done it once. And like Patricia's son says on quite a few occasions, whoever this sick person was, to be that sick, they must have done it before, or they'll do it again. And like you said, I completely agree. It's rare that a murder that's sexually motivated or involves mutilation, as this does both, it's extremely rare for that to be an isolated incident. And to know that there's 7 female cold cases within 20-year window of that broader vicinity, that's quite worrying. It could very easily be one of many. And I genuinely personally think that it is likely that whoever did this has done more. And to think it's only been 25 years. I say only with caution, because obviously for Patricia's family this is a hell of a long time. But it's only been 25 years, meaning if this person were 30 when they did it, that person's now 55. If this person were 50 when they did it, they're now 75. The chances are this person is still alive. And if they're still alive, they're still walking the streets. They're still very dangerous. That is super scary and super worrying. And that's before we even mention the right and wrong and the justice and the closure for Patricia's son and Patricia's family and Patricia. It is just so far beyond wrong that an incident of this level we haven't got anywhere to. And maybe it's because the details of the crime weren't pushed enough. Maybe the community didn't think it was that bad. Someone's been murdered. It's, as Patricia's son says, that's quite easy to say, oh, someone's been murdered. But when it's someone that you know, or it's when you know the severity of what that person did, then it makes everything a lot different. Not to me, but it does to people in general. Finally, I need to praise Patricia's son. When this happened, he was just 5 years old. He didn't quite understand what happened. As far as he knew, his mum had gone to heaven. 7 years later, when he's roughly about 13, he starts to understand a bit more, he starts to learn a bit more, but his mum's been taken from him. And understandably, this puts him in this massive pit of depression and anxiety, locking himself in his room. But luckily for this young man, his auntie were nearby. She talked to him and she helped him through that rough patch. 3 years later, when he was 16, he decided he just couldn't sit by anymore. He had to do something. He had to find the answers. So he started WhoKilledMyMom.com. If anything, starting WhoKilledMyMom.com, this fueled his fight for answers. But it hasn't been an easy fight for him by any stretch of imagination. He's had to keep nudging the police constantly. If you read through his blog posts on WhoKilledMyMom.com, it is full of him going, come on guys, please investigate, carry on, don't give in. And he's doing that constantly. He was having to nudge them to refer it to put it on Crime Watch, which they were very hesitant to do for a long time. Raising money to put forward for information rewards. And then he had to fight the police to make it an official reward scheme, which had to go through the Crime Watch. That alone took about 2 years after he'd got the money. Every year, he rallies the media together to bring attention to his mum's case on her anniversary. And at one point, he was putting flyers up, posters up, A4 print, and he was putting them on bus stops and everything, appealing for information. But the transport service reported him to the police, and the police came and told him he had to stop. But in the face of having to constantly fight for help from people that were supposed to already be helping him, he never got bitter, he never got resentful for the police or the media. He stayed humble, he stayed polite, and off the poster incident, he even went on to apologise to the transport service for doing the posters. And throughout all this, he has managed. People have said to him, dude, you need to get on with your... Why aren't you getting on with your life? And obviously his answer was, I can't until I find justice, but he has got on with his life. At 16, when he started the site, he was going to college. This guy is amazing. He is an absolute inspiration for so many people. And I want to give him my praise for that. And I really do hope he finds the answers. Now, I've read and watched every single piece of information on WhoKilledMyMom.com. And there's a lot of it. And it was all written and made by Patricia's son. And that made this entire investigative journey a lot more heartbreaking and a lot more harder to do. So I thought it were only fair to end this video, instead of using my usual plea for help, I'm going to read a quote that he'd put on the website that echoes my intentions and hopes for this case. I hope that because of advances in science and technology, and with the help of the public, one day the killer can be found. I hope someone out there will come forward to help put my mum's killer away and let her rest in peace, and allow myself and my family to continue living the best we can. What happened to my mum has not only taken away her life, but taken parts of mine and my family's too, by means of grief, stress, depression, anxiety, and hate. And then in another quote, he wrote, all I have for you is hate. If it takes me till I die, I will find you, I promise. So there we go. If you have any information at all, please visit WhoKilledMyMom.com. Patricia's son has also set up a Facebook page, a Twitter page, Instagram page, and YouTube channel. All of the above have information on the crime reference number, contact details for the Crime Stoppers and the police, and even Patricia's son, if need be. Now, please do share this video or podcast. However you're listening to this, please do share it. The way I see it, every time you share it, more people will watch it, which will potentially refresh more people's minds. And it just increases the chances of us getting some crucial information that could help Patricia's family and the police and the Crime Stoppers solve this case. So please do share it. Also, head over to WhoKilledMyMom.com to find out more information. I don't know if it's still there. There is also a message board where you can put a message up to Daniel in an open way so everyone can read it. On the flip side of things, if you enjoyed this, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel or to my podcast, however you're participating in this right now. Thank you very much. Thumbs up, and please do share it. Till next week, guys.